The most anticipated Kiseki game has reached my PS4, and it's time to talk about it. No, not that one. That's never coming to the West. Yep, that's the one. So I've been skipping games in my Kiseki review since it was hard for me to really talk about all the games, because there are only slight differences between them, and I feel that every Kiseki fan can agree that these games are never short of amazing. There was no point in stating the obvious. I reviewed Trails in the Sky first chapter, then skipped second and third chapter to reviewing the Crossbow arc together, and again skipping Cold Steel 1 and 2, going straight to reviewing 3. The core gameplay formula has not changed in Cold Steel 3, as its identity as a Kiseki game is very apparent, but there was enough new changes to talk about to warrant a review. Cold Steel 3 takes place sometime after the events of Cold Steel 2. We see the continuation of the conflict between multiple parties like Osborne, Ouroboros, and our heroes. By this time, a majority of the students we know from Thors have graduated and are following their own paths in life. Despite Falcom usually being somewhat predictable in some of their story elements, reusing tropes, and even story sequences from Cold Steel 1 and 2, there are new surprises that keeps the story entertaining and engaging. There are new characters to meet in every chapter and new challenges for our beloved heroes to overcome. Personal favorites not only from Class 7's alumni, but other class alumni as well, make a return and are given more character development. It was here where all my hard work reading every line of dialogue from the old games paid off, because I could see their progressive growth from being students to functioning adults in the world. It almost, well, not really, brings a tear to my eye seeing all the kids grow up. Although it's hard to say how much seeing old characters will affect you if you're not one of those people who talks to everyone and fills out their profile sheets in the notebook. Maybe you like to just get through the main story and skip all the side stuff, which is fine because you should play your way. But I think there is a lot to be missed, not only in Cold Steel 3, but Kiseki games in general when you do this. I've started the series with the first game, Trails in the Sky first chapter, and as I continued on to subsequent games, I've always liked how Falcom continues to build on its world and characters. They pay close attention to all the events that are happening, and all previous conflicts are remembered. Characters will make references to past games, and even newspaper articles are carried over to some extent. Anton is one of my favorite characters who has been in many, if not all of the previous Kiseki games despite having no significance in the main story. But his misfortunes was one of the highlights in my playthroughs, which is why I'm a bit saddened that he did not make an appearance in Cold Steel 3. Falcom continues to make its world feel alive through flavor NPCs such as Anton, although he's a bit of a special case. In most games I've played, those NPCs are boring and offer no purpose except to make the world feel less barren. But in Kiseki, they offer a view into how citizens live in their ever-changing world of Zemuria. Some of their dialogue even gave me a chuckle, such as the father telling white lies to his daughter when she asks some questions. This trend continues with Cold Steel 3, leading to a really immersive experience where it's easy to suspend my disbelief. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say about the story in order to avoid going into spoilers, which by the way is so hard to avoid when you visit any Kiseki fandom or even Google Images. So let's make this a safe place and move on. As I've stated before, Cold Steel 3 holds true to the Kiseki formula, offering little significant changes in gameplay outside of combat from Cold Steel 1 or 2. You've got the school, the train ride to different places, the daily grind for tasks both assigned and hidden, character notes, and then a free day right after where you bond with all your favorite ladies. Or dudes, whatever your poison is. Or maybe you're antisocial and just head straight to bed without talking to anyone. But this gameplay loop is what we all love about Kiseki games, right? Besides the amazing story and characters, that is. I know exactly what I'm getting into and what to expect from these games because they follow the same design. As much as I found it repetitive when playing Trails in the Sky first chapter for the first time, it's something I've grown into and learned to enjoy. Falcom didn't just sit on their butts and do nothing though, as they've added a small number of additions to gameplay, giving me more things to do and enjoy. When I'm out in the field, talking to the townspeople, seeing what's happening in the world, sometimes I will come across a story I can give to Monk. Kind of like how he submits stories to Radio Trista in Cold Steel 1, but with more of a player focus this time around, as you get rewarded for doing so instead of Monk just ripping your stories for his own personal gain. At the same time, I also come across scenery, which can be a cityscape or a natural environment, that I can take a picture of to send to the Imperial Chronicle. Similar to the radio stories, this was something that's been done before, although to a much lesser extent in Trails in the Sky for Liberal News and Trails from Zero for Crossbell Times. But the downside is, it's not a real photo mode like in Dragon Quest XI or Final Fantasy XV. It's just a reach this spot and press X. Still, the world of Kiseki has some nice designs and beautiful scenery. Sure, it's not the best on the market, but the graphics look good and are an improvement from its PS3 counterparts. It's nice to be able to take some time out to enjoy some of the sights during the chaos that is happening. The other addition is a slight quality of life change, if you want to call it that, though I'm still kind of on the fence about it. And that change is that every hidden quest or object is marked on the map right now. Though hidden quests are still not part of your assigned tasks, you only need to bring up a map to see where they are, making it much easier not to miss anything. Although getting books from people, and similarly with recipes, still requires you to talk to every single person when there is a change unless you're following a guide. On one hand, I don't like being babied in games with the UI telling me where everything is, while on the other hand, this thing is so damn useful for a game that contains so many missables and a large area to cover. Speaking of areas to cover, the fast travel map now contains more entries that you can fast travel to, specifically dungeons, which saves so much time. Granted, you do have to visit that area on foot first before you can fast travel there. The fast travel mechanic is by far my most favorite Kiseki quality of life change, and I missed it so much when I went back to play Trails in the Sky first and second chapter. Something else I really appreciate are card games and video games. I love when games do this. There was Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII, Blade in Tokyo Xanadu, which I know was in Cold Steel first, but I played Tokyo Xanadu before I played Cold Steel. And probably more I'm forgetting. Cold Steel 3 introduces Vantage Masters, a new card game that replaces Blade, and it's a game that I really enjoyed playing, despite it being a very minimal part of my playthrough. It's a game that is similar to Hearthstone or Magic. Of course, this means Vantage Masters has more complexity to it than Blades, which, sure, there was some strategy involved if you wanted to call it that, but it mostly came down to the luck of the draw. When winning a game of Vantage Masters, new cards are won from the opponent, but this can only happen once. It was kinda like an anti-system, but not really since I had nothing to lose. It would be nice to see this game being developed further to be like Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII, but I know that's not gonna happen. It would be cool though. Before I start digressing about how great Triple Triad is in Final Fantasy VIII, let's talk about how great the combat is in Cold Steel 3 and how all things related to it has been improved. There were plenty of additions that elevated combat to the next level, and were mechanics I incorporated into my strategies during my initial Nightmare playthrough. We have Brave Orders, Breaks, Sub-Master Courts, and Assault Attacks. Brave Orders were something that was extremely useful and is the best addition to combat since the introduction of Overdrive. Using BP, which I usually had plenty of, characters in the party, including support characters but not reserve characters, would be able to give out orders to the team, which is a fancy way of saying you get buffs for a certain amount of turns. Buffs like reduced damage were so useful on Nightmare because of enemies' high damage output, and more importantly, their one-shot S-crafts. Many characters had other useful battle orders as well that could be used depending on the situation and the player playstyle, giving more options to get through those tough situations. This was something I never knew I needed until I actually got to experience its glory and magnificence in Cold Steel 3. The break system is an iteration of the unbalanced mechanic from the previous Cold Steel games. In Cold Steel 3, enemies have a break gauge that depletes when they are damaged. If the break gauge is depleted, they will go into a broken state where they lose their turn along with many other useful benefits. This is just another mechanic that was super useful and I relied on it a lot when playing through Nightmare. It felt really rewarding breaking enemies and just filling up on BP to do powerful actions. Then we have the new Sub-Master Courts, which works similarly to Master Courts. Master Courts can now be assigned as Master and Sub, opening new possibilities for builds and getting our boy Reen super overpowered. The only difference between a master slot and a sub slot is the sub slot nerfs the quartz, so you get less stats from it and it will only get the first passive buff instead of all three. Still, it's a really nice addition to character progression. And lastly, for combat we have Assault Attack, which is done on the field. It's just an easier way to engage enemies with triple advantage since it's a range attack and also looks cool. So with all that said, I'm pretty much done drooling over Cold Steel 3. There was a lot to like and not much to dislike. I have a couple of complaints, but they're not too major. For instance, the combat UI is smaller compared to the older games, which made it harder to see numbers, but I adjusted to it eventually. Localization is my other complaint. Although I got through the game understanding what was going on, there were some pretty big mistakes along with text errors and misspellings. For example, there was a mention of a head nurse named Cecil who was at St. Ursula College, but the dialogue used male pronouns. Anyone who has played the Crossbow arc knows she's Lloyd's sister and is far from being a dude. This is a bit concerning and makes me wonder how other information gets translated, especially when the game lore dumps a ton of information. Japanese sentences can be pretty ambiguous and can require a lot of context from previous games to make sense, and hopefully I'm just overthinking this. On the bright side, I didn't encounter any bugs, though I did crash once, but that's not bad considering the 100 hours I put into the game. I loved all the characters I've met, even if some of them do use outdated and overused anime tropes and have abnormal body proportions. The story is magnificent, and even though it left me on a cliffhanger, I'm not even mad! I didn't mention anything about the soundtrack, so I'll do it here. It's pretty good, and I have a few favorites like the theme of a specific area that had a sad history, and one of my favorite characters is from there. Or the rock theme in the final dungeon that gets me amped up for the last dungeon crawl and final showdown. I've definitely seen Falcom do better though, like in the Crossbell series or Ys 8, but I like what Cold Steel 3 had to offer. So to end this, I'll just say, Cold Steel 3 is what I wanted and expected from a Kiseki game, and I look forward to playing the last game, whenever that releases in the West.